Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. I would just like to show you this right here is the lineup for movies that I'll be doing after this whole franchise thing is done. So please, if you want to see your movie added on, I will be picking one movie from each comment section from this video here on out. So please add what movies you would like to see me review so I may add them to this list. Let's get to the video, everyone. So, Narnia 1988. Yep, we're back to the magical world of Narnia. And this time, we're trying to strip the magic out of everything. Because this movie tends to do that quite often. I mean, it does not keep you engaged. It takes a lot of creative liberties with the book. And frankly, it's not the best adaptation. There's better adaptations of the book out there on the account of this is number 2 of 3 adaptations. Anyway, before I talk too much, let's get into the movie. So we start this one out by being introduced to our main characters. We have Peter. He's the oldest, though he looks the same age as Edmund, who's the third youngest, who looks the same age as Susan, who's the second youngest, who looks the same age as Lucy, who's the fourth youngest. That's one problem I have with this movie is they all four look like they're around the same age. They're all around the same height, same age. I don't understand why they didn't choose a bigger age gap between the children so you can tell them apart. But I guess that was their creative choice. I don't know. Anyway, they're shipped away, and Edmund decides to start running his mouth because in this one his mouth gets him into a lot of trouble as his character is supposed to. And he's like, "Why do we have to go to the country? Why are we being shipped away? Why can't we go back to where the war's at? Nothing ever interesting happens in the country." Which is basically him saying, "Hey, can we go back and get hit with a bombshell? That's a great idea. Super fun."
Which is why we're all being sent away.
Spoil sports, grown-ups.
So we find out that they're headed to a mansion, and that's where a professor lives, and that's where they're going to live until the whole war is over and they can go back home. So first we meet Mrs. McCready, who's the housekeeper, and she's quite harsh to the children, honestly. She's just like, "Oh, they're just such a bother. I mean, lady, you're taking care of these kids because of a war. Try and be a little bit nicer." But the professor, on the other hand, he's a real nice guy. He's like, "I'll try to remember all your names, but I'm really old, so I might forget." Um, but yeah, that's basically their characters. And soon, here comes one of the big problems I have with this entire movie is they use walking as filler in between scenes. Like they're trying to fill up time in these individual episodes, so they'll have the children just walk really, really slowly throughout the entire house. Uh, and like while they're exploring, we don't need to see them walk up the stairs and then up the second flight of stairs and then through the hallway. We don't need to see that. Just get them to where they need to go. We can probably figure it out as the audience. And they do that throughout this entire thing. I mean, like every single time they have to go somewhere, we just get to see a big long thing of them just walking and walking and walking. And it gets kind of frustrating because they're doing it just to kill some time. So it's raining on a sunny day, and they decide to walk around the house, and that's why we have to do all this walking. And how in the book and the other movies they play hide and seek at this particular moment. They just decide, hey, let's go for a walk. And while they're walking, Lucy decides to stay back because she notices something about the wardrobe and decides to go right in. And now she's transported to the magical world of Narnia, where she knows nothing about it. At least so we thought, until Mr. Tumnus shows up and she's like,
Excuse me?
Goodness gracious me.
Are you a fawn?
I didn't know that as the audience. Like, how, like, you took the whole magic out of this moment because Lucy was supposed to talk to Tumnus and none of them were supposed to know what each other were. And that's what made their connection so strong. From the beginning, they didn't know who each other, like, what the other one was. They'd never seen anything of their kind. They both were on the same level, and that's what made this connection so special. And you take that out, the second you make Lucy say.
Fawn?
So Lucy and Tomness start talking, and Tomness then invites Lucy to his house. And that's when we get a big reveal that, oh my gosh, he's a very hairy man. Tomness then goes to tell her why it's always winter, and instead of like asking her if she wants to hear a song, he just whips his flute out and starts playing it. I mean, like that double flute thing. I'm not sure what exactly this instrument's called. I also like to note that the instrument looks different in all three adaptations of this movie, and just an odd little fact for you there. Anyway, he starts playing this song, and then Lucy looks at the fire and starts to get a vision of what Narnia looked like before it was always winter.
I'm a gnome!
Whenever he finally gets Lucy to drift off to sleep, he just gets really depressed. And then he starts fake crying. And whenever Lucy wakes up and sees this, she just demands he stops. She's like, stop it right now. And that's exactly what she should have done in that moment, because that was the fakest cry I've ever seen in my entire life. And she's like, why on earth are you fake crying here, dude? And he's just looks at her and says, he's like, I'm a kidnapper for the White Witch. Which, pause right here, is another thing I did not like how they changed. Because in all the other stories, it's just law that whoever sees a human child has to kidnap them and take them to the White Witch. In this one, he's like hired. I guess, he went, got the job application, submitted it, gave her the handshake, got the employed by the White Witch, which kind of just, takes a little bit of the meaning out of it, because this doesn't show that he was doing it out of fear. This is showing it he was like going to kidnap her because he was employed to do that job.
I'm in the pay of the White Witch. I'm a kidnapper.
He then goes on to say that his father would never do such a thing, and then we get this shot of his dad, and honestly, I kind of want that hanging in my house. I want a picture of Tomness's dad just hanging on my wall, because that is a very, very beautiful photo.
Father would never have done a thing like this.
Being the good fawn he is, he takes her back to her hometown through the wardrobe into the spare room, as he calls it. Drops her off there, and she exits, and she's like, guys, look, I'm here, I'm back from where I was. And then they're like, then was it Peter, surprisingly, is the one who starts teasing her the most about this. The one who's supposed to be the oldest and the most responsible teases her, and then all Edmund does in this scene is just go, and that's it. Peter just, straight up starts making fun of her and saying how ridiculous her idea was, and tells her to stop playing. I mean, he's not he's not showing the leadership that he needs to show for his character, and that also takes a lot out of this movie.
Jolly good hoax, Lucy. You really took us in for a moment.
It's not till later on that we see Edmund start being more mean to her than Peter was, because Peter stops, Edmund does not. So Edmund keeps picking on her, and then she gets depressed and doesn't want to talk to them. And they're like, why don't you want to talk to us? It's because you guys have been making fun of her. That's why. But anyway, I get a little sidetracked. Back to the story. It starts raining on a sunny day again, and Peter's like, hey, how about we play some hide and seek? Now they play hide and seek. They're supposed to do that before, whenever Lucy would find Narnia, and then this was supposed to be the moment where she sneaks off in the middle of the night to go into the wardrobe. But no, they're playing hide and seek. So she goes out and she goes back to the wardrobe because she's like, maybe Narnia is there again. And Ed decides to follow her. And whenever Edmund follows her, he now enters Narnia for the first time. And that's whenever the White Witch pulls up.
Okay, I'll pull up.
Edmund now learns that she says she's the Queen of Narnia, and she's in charge of all the land, and it all belongs to her. And then she asks what Edmund is. Edmund, of course, mentions that he's human after like a while of them talking, and she gets up and gets ready to smite him whenever the dwarf on that's driving's like, hey, maybe we can actually use this fella to learn about his brothers and sisters and just get rid of all four of them at one time, instead of getting rid of one and have a chance of being four more of them. And she's like, oh, this is a great idea. So then she decides to be nice to Edmund, and this whole entire time she's being nice to him, she looks like she just wants to wring his neck. I mean, she says, are you comfortable, honey? Are you having a great time? Like, she looks so perturbed and fed up, and I honestly don't blame her. I mean, Edmund is very, very annoying in this one, and he's really dumb. She even calls him an idiot. She also flips out on him whenever she finds out that his sister has been there before. Like she's like, there's been nasty stories about me. They're all fake, 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 and just flips out. I mean, she's on the edge this entire time, and honestly, I like this portrayal. It's something new. On the one we got before this would just flip out over everything. This one holds all that back. So just imagine the White Witch we got before with the cartoon, but if she just held everything on the inside.
If your sister has met one of those fawns, she may have heard nasty stories about me.
She then gives him Turkish delight, which makes him accept anything she says thereafter. I mean, she knows a sucker when she sees one, and Edmund is a sucker. So she gets him to do literally anything she asks and sends him on his way. He's like, all right, I'll bring my brothers and sisters, and I'll go live in your castle, and I'll be the new king of Narnia whenever I'm old enough. So on his way back, he runs into Lucy, who is also there, and she's like, yes, Edmund, you made it too. Finally, I just saw Tomness. He's all right. The White Witch didn't hurt him. And Edmund and them start actually in this one have a conversation before they head back to the real world, which is something different than what we've seen in the movies in the movie before this. Whenever they head out, of course, Edmund does his thing where he lies, and everybody believes Edmund. And then Lucy runs off crying. Susan and Peter decide to go and talk to the professor about what the whole thing is going on with their siblings and see if he could know anything about it. And basically, he's just like, hey, stop being idiots. Your sister's telling the truth. I mean, just look at her. How could she lie? So they just, believe that. And then they're like, all right, we'll head out and we'll just try to believe Lucy a little bit more. And while they're out there, they meet up with the other two, and Mrs. McCready has some guests. And whenever she sees them, she's like, hey, I told you not to be here around my guests, so go away. And then she's like, oh, those are just our refugees we have to take care of. Their parents could possibly be dead.
I have told you are to keep out of the way whenever I have people in the house. Shoo! Evacuees.
They end up running away and they start playing a game. And they're like, oh, let's hide from Mrs. McCready. Let's see where we can go where she won't follow. And she just happens to be going the exact direction that they are. So until their last place possible is the wardrobe. So whenever they, and the wardrobe just opens on its own and they just run right in. I mean, once it opened on its own, I'd be like, that thing's possessed. I'm kind of going to stay away from it. Nope, there's like, let's hop in. It's the last place left. Now they're all four finally in Narnia, and this is where our story begins to pick up, because they decide to go visit Tomness, and they find out he's been captured by a man in a fursuit.
Long live the Queen!
But they also find out that that's not the only furry lurking in these woods, because they find Mr. Beaver, and oh god, he's ugly.
Ugh. Brother, ugh. What's that? What's that, brother?
Now, before you get on me about effects not being as good back then, I just would like to point out, for starters, that they could have used a shorter person and put them in a beaver outfit. They could have used a puppet. They could have used a stuffed animal. They actually have the ability that we see later on in this exact episode anthology of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. They actually have effects that they were able to use to make other people shorter, and it made sense for that. Why did they make the beaver a full-grown man in a beaver costume? Makes no sense. Anyway, he just decides to lead him to his house, where you find an equally horrific Mrs. Beaver.
Here are the sons of Adam and the daughters of Eve.
So you've come at last.
And right after that, we get a big old time killer again. There is some more filler with them just learning how to set up for dinner. So, like, they go out and teach Peter how to fish, which is just something they can do to waste time. They teach the girls how to set the table, which is something they do to waste time. Because this thing was a show, so there wasn't enough book, so they had to waste a lot of time, which kind of dulls the experience. I mean, while watching this, just like, hey, can we just move on already? And it just gives you that feeling, and honestly just makes it less enjoyable to watch. I mean, there's so much they could have cut out of this movie because, like I said, technically it was a show first. There's so much they could have cut out, and it would have been perfectly fine without it. But they needed it to fill some runtime. So here we are.
First things first. Please, start.
Whenever we finally get to dinner, they get hit with a ton of exposition here by Mr. Beaver. He tells them rhymes, he tells them where they're going, he tells them all the prophecies, and then they find out Edmund's gone. Wait, Edmund's gone?
Oh, where's Edmund?
He's gone!
Saw him last.
How long's he been missing? Did you notice?
No, did you? His coat's not here. Perhaps he's outside.
Where's Edmund? He's on his way to go see the White Witch. And on the way there, he splits and does like this Gollum thing where he starts arguing with himself. This is also to fill up runtime because he has his doubting half, which is a creative idea if it had meaning behind it. But in this case, it's just to fill up runtime because Edmund did it full blind. Like this also takes a little bit out of the story because Edmund did it like blind. He did it blind because he was mad because he was so full of himself. He didn't have any doubts. He was 100% sure the thing he was doing was right. And this one has him, have doubts about it. And then he just tells his other weird half, like that pops out of him, to shut up and let's keep walking. So he goes, and whenever he finally makes it to the White Witch's castle, it takes him forever to get into the door. And we have to see the whole process because they want to have filler for this episode. And it's very, very annoying. I know I keep talking about the filler, but it honestly is just so irritating. And it takes so much out of this, and it just honestly made me want to fall asleep while it was all happening. So Edmund sees all the statues in there, and then he's greeted by the fursuit man that stole Thomas. Dun, dun, dun! And whenever he finds this man, he tells Edmund to wait while he goes and gets the White Witch. He meets the White Witch, and she's not as nice this time. She's not catering to Edmund. She's really harsh with him. He's like, "Don't be mean to me. Hey, I brought them this far. I brought my brothers and sisters to the beaver dam that's just right down the road. Trust me, you can go find it if you just drive out there." So the White Witch then sends the wolf and his squad out to go get the beavers. And here comes some more irritating filler that they did not need because it shows them getting ready to evacuate, and every 30 seconds, Mrs. Beaver is like, "Wait, I gotta grab this. Wait, I need that." And it's supposed to be funny, but it's irritating because it's just so they can fill up time in the episode. And it just makes Mrs. Beaver look really dumb, and it also takes like the fear out of this chase because you don't have any fear that our heroes might get caught because they're taking their grand old time and they're not alarmed. So why should we be alarmed? It takes so much from that moment, and you just got to kind of look at it and just ask why. Like, you could cut that out and it would make this so much better, but they didn't do it for some reason. They just decided to add so much filler, which ruins the story you're trying to tell, and it just makes it very irritating. And now the wolves took so long that they did not find him in the beaver dam because they didn't know all that filler was going on, I guess. But anyway, they didn't find him. They report that to the witch, and the witch decides to hop in her sled with Edmund and go and get them herself. And while the beavers are hiding and stuff, they hear a sled pull up a little bit later down the road, and it's not the White Witch, it's Santa Claus!
Oh my God!
And I love this portrayal of Santa Claus because he just looks at these kids and they're like, "Oh, look, a bunch of 10-year-olds. Here's some weapons for you. Go and have fun with those." No, he tells them that they're tools. But I mean, it is funnier if you just think of it as he just gave a bunch of 10-year-olds knives and swords and a bow and arrow. The witch now pulls up to a different party with a fox and some beavers, just like a bunch of people in these costumes. Like I said, this would be a perfect moment. Also, this would be a perfect moment to, have some puppets because you have a big table there. You can just stick your hand up. You can have squirrel puppets. You could have fox puppet. You can have all the animals be puppets. But no, You decide to put a bunch of people in fursuits, which probably cost more than just, having a couple of puppets. I mean, the puppets would have looked less weird. Honestly, just puppets rule, man. What can I say? Anyway, she's like, why are you guys having all this? Who gave you this stuff? And they say Father Christmas, and the squirrel's also in this one. But she's less annoying because she gets shut up quicker. Because the witch is just like, zap, don't want to hear it. Let's move on.
Please don't.
So the snow starts melting, and our heroes finally make it to Aslan's camp. Peter, Lucy, and Susan, that is. And here's my thing with puppets. Aslan at this camp is a puppet, and he's a beautiful puppet. The only thing is, they didn't take any time to actually make his mouth move with the puppetry they had. He looks incredible, but the second he starts speaking, it's lame. Like his voice is not a good enough voice. It's not powerful enough to be Aslan, and his mouth doesn't even line up with the words he's saying. They just have it open, and the words just appear. Like he's just and then it says what he needs to say. And honestly, I'll tell you what, I'll speak like that next clip, and you can see how uncomforting it is.
Welcome, Peter, son of Adam. Welcome, Susan and Lucy.
I would just like to mention in this scene that the animals that they have are animated pretty well. I wish this whole movie would have been animated like that, because it honestly would have made a better movie. I know there's already an animated movie, but if it had this type of animation that they use for the animals, it would be way cooler. But like I said, back to Aslan and how he talks, just very annoying. I don't like this portrayal of Aslan. It's not as good as the other ones I've seen. It's just, it kind of throws you off a bit. And at this camp, while they're there, a wolf shows up, and everybody just starts running. Like, they start booking it, and this also makes their army look really weak, because how are they going to do any sort of fighting if one wolf, one person, one troop that they're going to have to face 1,000 of when they have to do this final battle is able to scare them all off?
Let the prince win his spurs.
So Peter ends up fighting off the wolf all by himself, because Aslan says, nobody touch him. This is Peter's fight. Let him deal with it. And honestly, I don't think anybody else was going to fight the wolf anyway. They all seem pretty scared. So Peter fights the wolf and ends up winning after this fight. And we cut to the White Witch, who's out in the woods and starts summoning these creatures from beyond, these scary creatures. And they're all animated too. And like I said, I love the animation. I just wish this whole movie would have been that animation, because it would have looked a whole lot better. Then, as they're out in the woods, they think about killing Edmund, but right before they do, Aslan sent his people to go free Edmund because they followed a wolf there, and they end up freeing him and taking him back. And that's whenever you find out that the White Witch, the reason they couldn't find her was because she was hiding as a tree, and her companion was hiding as a rock. Then the witch ends up following them back and making a bargain with Aslan for Edmund's soul. And whenever Aslan and them go off and talk alone, they say Edmund's freed, and that's the end of it. And they go on with the day. And this is one thing that the movie does that really, really irritated me. This is what I talk about whenever they take the magic out of moments and just tell you what's going to happen, which is what they've been doing this whole time. Whenever all of the kids are sitting in the tent together, there's I feel like something awful is going to happen to Aslan. I think Aslan's going to get hurt. I think something really, really bad will happen to Aslan. Don't tell us, just let it happen. Let that long walk happen with us not knowing, as the audience, what he's about to do. Let us feel that moment instead of ruining it by just telling us what's going to happen beforehand, because you need some filler for your episode. Please. Why did you have to do this?
Afternoon. He's not going to be there.
At the battle.
He's leaving it to me. To us.
we finally make it to the night where Aslan's about to go and do what and go and sacrifice himself on the stone table. And this is the part that really is supposed to hit hard. It's supposed to be heart wrenching. It's supposed to be tough to watch. Even the cartoon nailed this scene perfectly. And this movie falls short of it. I was so disappointed with how they handled this scene. It wasn't scary, it wasn't sad, it wasn't like it didn't make it hurt as it should have. All the bad guys were goofy, but they didn't mock him. They were just kind of laughing. But like the mocking is what hurts the most. Like they should be throwing insults at him. They should be humiliating him. This should be humiliating for Aslan. And I mean, sure, it is a little bit, but it's not as good as other interpretations have done it because they've done it way better. This is supposed to be the toughest part to watch, and honestly, it wasn't that tough to watch. I mean, I was left disappointed. Like this broke the movie the rest of the way of all the damage that was already done. This is what kind of just put the last nail in the coffin for me. There's no redeeming this thing. This was supposed to be their big turnaround, and it just fell off. Witch hypes up her troops, and they all leave, and they get ready to attack all the good guys. And now Aslan ends up coming back, and they end up this is one thing I really like that they added. I'll give them props for this. Susan and Lucy fly on Aslan instead of just like have him run sort of like a horse. He like flies through the air, and I honestly like this addition. I mean, it was pretty nice. The only problem I had with it was they showed him flying for way too long because they wanted to fill up more time in this episode, and that is where they kind of lost me. And the battle itself is not very exciting. I mean, this battle doesn't feel like it has like a whole lot of weight because nobody's selling the fact that like they're in danger. They're just kind of like, yeah, 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 and it just goes on that like that forever. Just random clips of people doing that. It's honestly pretty lame. Aslan gets all the troops they need. They have a giant that kicks open the door, which is another thing I liked how they added because none of the other adaptations that I've seen so far had the giant kick down the door and had the conversation with the giant. I liked how they added that. I'll be honest, that was a pretty good idea for them. But anyway, they head to the battle. The witch sees Aslan and gets a heart attack. That's how she dies in this one. She's like, ugh. And then it's pretty brutal from there because then she falls off a cliff and breaks her back on a rock. And I was like, ooh, ouch. Then you know the rest. They're all kinged and queened. They end up just stumbling upon the light post and going back to their home in this one instead of going out to get the white deer, whatever. I forget exactly what it's called. But they just end up going back to Narnia, and that's just kind of not Narnia. They end up just going back home through the door, and that's just about it. The professor gives them a talk saying, don't go to the wardrobe to see Narnia again, but you may enter Narnia again through a different mean next time. And that's supposed to set up for the next one, which I'll be doing in a little bit. Hopefully it's a whole lot better than this. I would give this movie a D because honestly, some of the effects were nice, and the charm of it, of being an early Narnia adaptation, was also pretty nice. I'd also like to mention that there is a Narnia adaptation that I can't do. It was an old serial before the cartoon was even made, but they only have a few images from that, and all the episodes are lost except for 2 of them. But for this adaptation, like I said, it's a D. I mean, it's there. There's nothing really special. If you're a Narnia fan, if you're a fantasy fan, I would watch it for like the novelty of it, but I wouldn't expect anything special out of this. Anyway, that's my review for Narnia. What do you think? Have you seen Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe 1988? If so, leave in the comments what you thought about this. Did you like it? If so, I mean, good for you. I'm glad that you like certain things. It was just not my cup of tea. But like I said, leave a movie that you want to see in the comments, and I'll see if I'll add it to my list. Anyway, I'm Roman Ritchie. This has been a Random Ritchie review. Have a great afternoon, a good night, a good morning, and if you are on the toilet, It's time to wipe. Goodbye, everyone.